So we'll start now. A very warm welcome to everyone on this panel, and also a warm welcome to all the attendees across Karnataka. Today we have a webinar on done by Mrs. Shantala, which will give us a great insight on understanding movements in sports and prevention of sports injuries. Uh, I welcome you all to this event. We have with us Dr. Rupa Lokesh, who would be the moderator for this session. Welcome, Dr. Rupa Lokesh. She is assistant professor with Sanjay Gandhi Institute of Physiotherapy and also treasurer Karnataka State Physiotherapy Federation. We welcome you, madam. We Today we have our panelist, our speaker, Dr. Shantala Yogi. She is BPT, MPT. She has done her bachelor's from JN Medical College, Belgaum, and master's from MB Shetty College of Physiotherapy, Mangalore. She is specialized musculoskeletal and sports physiotherapy. She's worked in various hospitals and clinics as consultant physiotherapist, and she is also a senior lecturer with Krishna Institute of Medical Sciences, Karad, and she's consultant physiotherapist with B7 Sports Basketball Academy as well. She has done a lot of research work, and she's been a veteran with the Badminton Association. Uh, she has done a research work in prophylactic ankle sports and athletic performance, peroneal tendon subluxation, a case report, effects of exercise on bone mineral density in osteoporosis. Scientific research have gained allocates and been awarded at national level for her. We welcome you, madam, Dr. K. Shantala Yogi. Dr. Rupa, madam, you can
Yes,
please
sir.
proceed with the...
Yes, Dr. Simon. Thank you for your introduction. Once again, good evening, all. So I welcome to this fifth webinar, 5th May, the third webinar, which will happening from in organization with Karnataka State Physiotherapy Federation. So, and I thank all the participants, those who have participated last two webinars. So I welcome all the participants. So one request to all participants, kindly mute all your audio and video. Okay, whatever the questions you need to ask for the speaker, you can put your questions in the question answers, or you can raise your hands or drop in a chat box. Okay, we'll forward speaker and she'll be answering for your question. Okay, so it's a wonderful session, and she's well versed with all the sports injuries and whatever the understanding the movements in sports medicine now, and how to prevent view of all the including the children, the school activities, because she's more active into the all this from the school days to you, which it will be really useful. And already just a partial lift down of the lockdown. So I hope all the participants will be utilize this session talk. So over to you, madam, Dr. Shantala, madam.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Rupa. Thank you, Dr. Mahendra. It was a very nice description about me. Yeah, I hope the lockdown is having a good effect on most of the people around. I hope all of you are well. So stay safe, take care. Yeah, we should be starting off with the session right now, shall we?
Yes, madam, you can continue. You can share your screen, madam.
Yeah, I'm doing that. Yeah, can you see that? One second. Yeah, is that visible? Hello? Hello?
Yes, madam. Please go on.
Yeah. Okay, so before we start, I would like to just mention that I've taken up a few photographs and things like that from the internet and maybe from a few books and things, more basically only for educational purposes. So today we're going to talk about understanding sports movements in sports. And why we need to understand the movements in sports is usually these movements that I'm going to talk about, a few of them are pretty common in most of the sports, and they are also associated with most of the sports injuries. So to talk about each and every sport would take a lot of time. So I try to compile everything and use the common movements that are there with sports. Okay. So coming to the sports movements, I think it's got stuck. Hello?
No, it came, ma'am. It's coming. It's coming. You can go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. So the basic, these are basic movements that are common to many sports, and it represents the primary movements involved in injuries. First is the cutting or the pivoting. So either cutting or pivoting means is when the athlete or the sportsman is running in a particular direction and suddenly changes the direction or turns to change the direction. Second is jumping. Third is catching, hitting, or sometimes you can even add tackling, I think, in this part of it. Now, coming to each of them, when you talk about cutting and pivoting, there are three phases in this. One is deceleration, plant and cut, and takeoff. Now, deceleration is where the athlete is running fast in one particular direction. Suddenly, to change direction, he reduces the speed. He has to plant or fix a foot, stop at a particular place, and change the direction in which he's going or turn. When you turn, it's called as a pivot, and then take off. Now, the mechanism of injury, what happens is when they decelerate and plant the foot, which is the fixed foot, and then there's a sudden change of direction, usually around this time is when the injury occurs. If you look at this, the pictures in the slides here, this is a basketball where you can see that one foot is planted. In one, the person is pivoting. In the other, he's just going to change directions and run. So those of you who played basketball will be able to understand this. Yeah. So these are the two pictures. Then here you have with football where he's changing directions, and again with American football, again where he's going to change direction. So they plant, they fix a foot, and then they change the direction. Now in jumping, what happens is two phases. Take off. Second, you land. So usually the injury or the mechanism of injury or when the injury occurs is when you're landing. When once the person lands, they immediately attempt to move. So either sometimes just before they land, they've turned their body, or after they land and foot is fixed, they turn their body. That is when the injury occurs. But then we also need to understand during the takeoff phase of the jumping also there could be injuries, because especially in semi-contact sports like basketball or football, wherein you have your opponent standing pretty close by to you and you're about to jump and the opponent's foot lands on yours. So, you know, it's such kind of contact with the opponent can end up with an injury. So if you look at this particular picture, you can see that the person is hitting the shuttle and then she's landing. And after she's landing, in a process to change the position or to change the direction, the person ends up injuring herself and falls. If any of you followed badminton, I think you would have followed that Carolina Marin had a similar kind of a injury when she fell down. Now this is with volleyball, where you can see that the net is in the middle, but then the opponent's foot is on this the person who's going to jump on that athlete's foot. So there also an injury can happen. And when the other person lands down, because there's somebody else's foot there, you can end up with a twist and lead to an injury. Third, coming to catching and hitting or tackling the opponent. Again, there are phases here. One is you need to track a moving object for which you need to have a good peripheral vision. So you are moving, there are going to be a lot of other players on field, and at that time you need to track a moving object like the ball, for example. Then you have to move to meet that ball. So the timing with which you're moving, you need to assess how fast or slow the ball is coming. You need to see which area is free and then move. And then either catch the ball or you need to hit the ball. So the timing here also makes a lot of difference. Your reaction time also comes into play here. Now, how the mechanism of injury for this is, one is poor timing or poor reaction time to where, suppose your teammate has passed the ball and your reaction time is a little slow for you to reach the ball, or you're caught unawares. You don't know that the person is throwing the ball at you, and then you know before you realize it, it's directly on you. Or there is a contact with the opponent, because along with you, your opponent is also going at the same speed or maybe a little faster to try and catch the object. And blocking of peripheral vision. Like I said, now if you take basketball itself, for example, you have about 10 people on court. So in that 10 people, you need to look out for your teammates. You need to look out for the ball. You need to see when they're going to throw it to you. You don't know if it's going to come to you or it's going to go to another teammate. So in such a thing, when the opponent is standing and they've blocked your vision, you may not be able to see that the ball is being passed at you. So these are some of the factors which will lead to the injuries. Now, if you can see these pictures with baseball and cricket, probably the timing with which they have swung the bat could be slow. The reaction time could be slow. They would be either the ball or it's bounced to you. Yes, bounce of the ball is also wrong, which could end up with an injury. Here is when you're tackling the ball, trying to catch it. If you look at it, he is interlocked his legs with the opponent, and that's when he's going to fall and injure himself. Here again, two of them are going to hit the football, and then they've ended up with an injury. Like you say, when you're going to take a catch and you end up with injuries. Now, one thing I'd like to mention here is, yeah, most of them are trained that how to fall is an important aspect here, which we'll probably talk later. So most of them, if you fall off straight, you end up getting an injury. So you need to roll. So that is one thing which needs to be taught. And I think with cricket and all is what they do. So not everyone who catches the ball and falls ends up with injuries. Here again, when they're tackling, you're coming in contact with the opponent. There. So most of these pictures are self-explanatory. Yeah, this is what can also happen, that in football, when the two players are going to kick the ball at the same time, so you end up kicking the opponent's foot rather than the ball. And this is when the person is caught unaware. This has happened in Olympics. I think most of us have seen it. There have been a lot of videos where this gymnast had fallen off. So when he landed, he snapped his bone. These are some of the injuries that can happen if a person is too tired and fatigued, and a lot of factors I'll be talking to you about, and he's not able to jump, or he slipped and can end up with injuries. Some wrong techniques or biomechanical techniques or methods in which a weightlifting thing is lifted and ends up with injury. These are some rare injuries where it's with all precautions and proper techniques and everything. This is like a rare thing where some other javelin thrower has thrown the javelin and has gone stray and hit another athlete. Now, injury prevention. Most of the times we end up talking a lot about the theory of how things are. So I thought we'd just talk about a little practicality of what we can do to prevent these injuries and what are the obstacles that we will be facing. So for injury prevention, I still believe prevention is better than cure. So you need to take all possible precautions there. One is the training schedules. If the training is over-scheduled, there is no rest, weekly change in road, too much of sudden change, you're not giving the body enough time to adapt to the changes. Training responses, if it's a too monotonous kind of a training, there's no enjoyment, and perceived exertion of each player also makes a lot of difference. This is more true with little children if you're dealing with them. Competition schedule, over scheduling of matches, continuously you're playing throughout the year. So when we are talking about the training techniques and the principles of training, the periodization and all doesn't happen in a proper manner. the lack of recovery during tournaments. These are some of the factors. Fatigue, stress, and fear. So the travel, the nutrition, hormonal imbalance. Now travel, how does travel affect? Most of the time what happens is, now I am active playing at the national level at badminton. So what I realize is tomorrow we have a match and many people land up either today evening or early tomorrow morning. So you land up today early morning and you have a match immediately. You don't have the time to adjust. The acclimatization doesn't happen. So these things can also be some of the factors which can lead to injuries. Nutrition, of course, what you eat also makes a lot of difference. Now we are dealing with children in my academy. We have children between 6 years to 19 years. And I am playing, or I'm associated with players 35 years above to almost 75. So the kind of nutrition definitely varies in these age groups. So what you had in your mid 20s or 20s to 30s may not be applicable to the younger generation or the older generation. So as and how your body is changing, you need to also change the nutrition aspect. Of course, the slight changes would definitely be there. Hormonal imbalances, this is especially true in women, which need to be taken care of, especially in children where the pre-pubertal and pubertal age group, there's hormonal changes. We all have heard about the female athlete triad. Hormonal imbalances that are happening with 35 and above, the premenopausal, menopausal age group. So all that again associated with the nutrition that they are taking in. Rest and sleep. So this is also important. Sleep is also a very important factor, which is usually neglected. I'll talk to you what the practical issues that we have seen with most of the players. Other factors are also the type of sport, the general health and age. Like I said, I've been associated with the extremes of ages here, the smaller children and the older age group. The type of sport, again, whether it's a semi-contact, contact sport, so, or non-contact sport. So the kind of injuries vary based on the kind of sport that you play. Previous injuries. So the recurrence is more common with previous injuries. This is especially true if rehabilitation is not properly done. Initially, at least during the time when I was playing as a child, there was no such thing as rehabilitation at all. It was slightly there and people were a little apprehensive about rehabilitation when we were students. And now, of course, people are a little more open, but still at the lower level, it's not as much as what is happening with the elite athletes. Athletes are more open to physiotherapy and rehabilitation. We are working with children at the grassroots level, where we are talking in terms of schools, colleges, amateur sportsmen, still lacking rehabilitation. So and especially if it's a previous injury, most people with half rehabilitative procedures and rehabilitation end up going back to sports and ending up with a re-injury, and there is a total cutoff from the sport that they are playing. So these are the risk factors which can lead to injury. Now, what needs to be one most important thing is fitness testing, aerobic and anaerobic fitness testing. Now, as a student, when we were selected by Empowerment and Sports, which is we underwent rigorous fitness testing at different levels, and then we were selected. We need to do is, as therapists, we need to do fitness testing on regular basis based on what the training level of each of these and what the age of each of these athletes are. Safe exercise guidelines. Now, safe exercise guidelines is one thing which we've seen. I mean, if most of you have been playing sports, or if not anything else, you definitely would have taken some swimming coaching at some particular time. So we have seen people telling us that there is something called as elbow rotation and knee rotation. But then if you actually biomechanically look at it, there is only a flexion and extension that's happening there. It's a hinge joint at the elbow. So there's no rotation rotary that is happening. So the osteokinematic and the arthrokinematic changes within the joint play that is happening is different, but you cannot really call it as a elbow rotation or a knee rotation. Children are being made to do these exercises. And people are not really very open to the fact that this is actually not what the exercises are. So we need to make safe exercise guidelines so that it is easy for coaches and trainers to follow that this is the particular thing, these are the biomechanics, and this is how each joint in the body moves. Warm up and cool down, most important. And very sorry to say, but I've seen very few people who do the warm up and cool down. And it is just taken for granted. Oh, it was very hot today, so it's fine. I'm already sweating, so I'm pretty warmed up. You're actually giving yourself excuses. This is very, very important, like especially for the children that I'm dealing with, or even the veteran category group. But thankfully to say, in the veteran category, most of them have been junior players and all that. So they've taken some form of professional training at some point of time. So most of them do their warm up and cool down. But the amateurs and weekend players and people who play for fun, they feel they're not professional players, so they don't need to do it. But in fact, you do need to do it, because the human body is the same, whether you're a professional athlete or not. So the injuries without any of these things will make a difference. It's as simple as this. Like I would explain to my students, saying that in the morning, when you before you start your car, you do idle it for some time so that the motor runs well. So this is the same similar principle, that human body itself is a machine. So it needs to warm up to be able to perform better. And cool down will help you in recovery to a certain extent. So that is also an important aspect which needs to be incorporated. And personally, we ourselves need to do it rather than somebody else telling us. So unless we ourselves decide that this is going to happen, I mean, we have to follow this just like brushing our teeth every day. Then if it's not incorporated in your training techniques, then you're going to miss out on this. Now, emphasis on flexibility, especially stretching exercises, that helps in certain amount, definitely for the sorenesses that would be there. This is also very, very important in children, younger children, pubertal age children, because whatever flexibility you're going to develop as a child will remain with you for most of your life. Of course, you need to continue it later, but those people who have never done any kind of flexibility exercises and suddenly want to start with yoga in the middle age or later in the later ages, they will not be able to do even a proper standing up and bending down and touching their toes to the floor. So, the flexibilities are important. What we need to understand is our muscles are like a rubber band. So the elasticity that is there, if you keep a rubber band unused for a long time and then you suddenly stretch it, it loses its elastic property, it totally overstretches, and then it's of no use. So something similar would happen with our muscles. So we need to keep using it. So you need to stretch it to its full length if you need the joints to be working properly, if you're going to need to have a proper balance between the muscles. Am I going too fast? Is it all right?
You're perfectly all right, man.
Yeah, okay. No, fitness training, again, fitness training, you need to differentiate fitness training between general and sports specific fitness training. The general fitness training would be something where you do for pre-adolescent and adolescent age. And sports specific would be for people who have specifically gone into a particular sport and have chosen a particular discipline of sport. General fitness training would also be for health, for people who recreational players and people who do not really do play sport but would want a fitness training to be done. Now we need to follow some scientific training techniques. Of course, the principles of trainings are also there, but then these are some of the points that I would like to also mention. Specificity, so the sport and individual needs. So your fitness training would also slightly vary based on the needs of each individual, each athlete. Progression, now you need to start. Now suppose you're doing a fitness training and you have an elite athlete there and you have a beginner, so you don't need to compare yourself to an elite athlete, or I need to do 1000 skips on the first day. So you need to see what your levels are and gradually increase. How do you know what your levels are? You need to get a fitness test done. So you need to know where your strengths are and where the weaknesses are, and then accordingly you need to progress. Overload, so you need to work harder than normal a little bit. You need to push. So your trainer needs to know how much to push you. So and the best person to do that would be your physiotherapist, of course. Reversibility, you need to train regularly also. You need to keep changing it and making it a little more interesting. Tedium, like I said, you need to keep it a little more interesting than a monotonous kind of training technique. Periodization, most of us know about this, where we have the pre-competition, during the competition, post-competition, and off-season training that is there. I don't think we can go into the depth of this right now because that in itself is a pretty vast topic. So just brushing across. Diet and hydration, yes, diet and hydration is a very, very important aspect and it is still neglected. Diet, anybody eats anything literally. I mean, of course, not many people know the kind of diet that they are not supposed to, where they do have something called as a pre-competition meal, post-competition meal. So people say, "Utna kya hai? Hum logon ne bachpan mein bhi we've played, you know, and how does it make a difference?" But yes, it definitely makes a difference. You need to have your carbohydrate loading. You need to know when you need proteins for the repair of the tissues when you have finished your competition. So the diet definitely makes a lot of difference. So you need to understand what is a pre-competitive meal, what is a post-competitive meal. Yeah, I'd like to mention a point about sports supplements. There is a big rise in people consuming sports supplements, especially because many elite athletes are doing that. But then you have to understand that there is a very big myth that if you're taking sports supplements, you're going to improve performance. So there again, now depending on what the supplements have, there could be some bad or banned constituents in the sports supplements, which could in fact be pretty harmful to you. But otherwise, it's not going to really improve your performance. Most of these sports supplements are for like your electrolyte imbalances, or if you have any imbalance or deficiency to be taken. So it very strictly needs to be taken after consulting sports physicians. So please don't try trial and error because it's easily available at Decathlon or is it easily available in any sports store, and it's the new fad kind of a thing. Safety equipments, yes, safety equipments need to be taken care of depending on the equipments of each particular sport. So you need to maintain your safety equipments well. So I bought a helmet and okay, it's been lying there for so many days and I didn't bother about it. And suddenly everything has a life in its own. So probably the cushioning inside or that also would be there. The simple thing that I would also mention is even your shoes would to a certain extent would be can be considered for a very very long time can also lose its elasticity, its cushioning. That again varies depending on which sport that you're wearing and how long you've been using it. It itself has a shelf life. So you buy a new shoes, you keep it there for 6 months without using it, it's actually of no use. It's going to lose its elastic property, that the materials that are used in it. Proprioceptive training, until now, maybe until last year or year before, this was pretty neglected, at least from this part of the country, or at least in India, from what I have seen, especially even in the rehabilitative part of it, where you're doing the exercises and it's gone. Probably to a certain extent because follow-up doesn't happen with rehabilitation. So the initial exercises when you're in the hospital, you will do it, the patients will do a few exercises, some home program once they are discharged from the hospital, and then they'll suddenly, once they're feeling fine, they'll suddenly get back to sporting arena. It's like taking your medicine where a painkiller is given, a dosage of 5 days is given. The patient will take it for 2 days and then they feel fine, and so then they discontinue it. So most of the times follow-up doesn't happen. So the proprioceptive training is a must before you return to sports, because your mechanoreceptors in your joints will definitely be affected to a certain extent, and this is more important to prevent your re-injuries. So this has to be incorporated in the rehabilitative program. Rest and recovery is very, very important. A lot of people get a little confused between rest and recovery. Inactivity, basically, when you're not doing any kind of activity, would be considered as rest. Recovery is something where you're doing something to feel better and recover from a particular strenuous activity that you have. So during recovery, usually you replenish your energy stores, you repair the damaged tissues, you let your body repair the damaged tissues. So rest and recovery is important. Sleep. This is something that is coming up in a big way, where a lot of research is being done in sleep, and it needs to be considered and given a lot of importance, because most of the players, even today, end up partying after a particular match or competition day, and then they have matches on the next day. So the exhaustion of the game, the whole day, the whole atmosphere, everything that is there, your body is not giving you enough of rest. And this, again, like I said, makes a lot of difference with the age group that you're there, children and the adults. the injury chances are even more. So your sleep is a very important factor. So this needs to be considered. A lot of people say just 4 hours of sleep is more than enough for me. Yeah, maybe on a normal day it may just be enough based on the activity that you would have, though people say it is though the research says that it is about 8 maybe 7 to 8 hours is a must, but for an athlete it goes up to about 9, 10, or maybe even 11 hours of proper sleep. Now we had another webinar where one of the sports medicine specialists happened to mention, saying that sleep especially in today's generation, the blue light emitting devices that are being used. So a lot of people go to sleep. They think, oh, I went to sleep at 8 o'clock. But at 8 o'clock, they've been using their mobile phones and all to scroll and things like till 11 o'clock. So you feel you're there that much and you slept so much more, but actually you're not resting yourself. So the amount and sleep, when you talk about sleep, it's not that, okay, I've gone there, I've gone to bed and I've immediately fallen asleep. You also need to see the amount of time that you've given yourself on the bed to relax and then fall asleep. So that aspect also needs to be considered. So if your athlete or your student is lethargic the next day, you need, or not able to perform all that well, you need to consider these factors of sleep, and then you need to consider how you're going to train them. Coming to prevention of re-injury, it's very important. Like I said, the chances of re-injuries are more, especially because rehabilitation follow-ups are not done. A structured step-by-step rehabilitation program needs to be followed. This needs to be understood by the patient or the athlete that you have to complete your rehabilitation program. So halfway through, if you're able to run a little bit without pain, you're able to do a little agility drills without pain, and suddenly you just get back to doing plyometrics, or you get back to doing strenuous exercises, you may end up with injuries again. So it has to be step by step, and you need to progress in a slow manner based on how your body is responding to the rehabilitation, how your body is responding to the healing of, and how much of injury, at what degree the injury is, and what kind of treatment you've undergone. Yeah. Now, to prevent re-injury, I would suggest that it is important that you need to put a prehab into your pre-season training. Now, when we spoke about the periodization, during the pre-season training, we need to add in something called as prehab. I do not know how many people are actually following this. Maybe at the elite athlete, sportsmen may be doing it, but at the grassroots level, definitely it's not been happening. You need to do a prehab at least 3-4 months prior to the first round of competition of that particular athlete. Approximately, the program should be at least twice a week and for about 60 to 100 minutes. Now, the content of the prehab should be extensive and a balanced aerobic and anaerobic kind of exercises along with interval training. Now, when you're doing this, you also need to focus on the skill work and specific cardio requirements specific to each of those sports, because this comes into the pre-season training. So the skill work and the cardio requirements also need to be worked according to the pre-season training. So this needs to be worked out along with the coaches. So the therapists and the coaches together need to make a program and then put it forward to the athlete. You need to note here, one, when you're doing a prehab or when you're doing any fitness training, you need to have, it is important that you need to have a fitness testing that you do at the start of a program, and then you also need to do at the end of a program. So that will give you an idea of what the weaknesses are in the beginning for each of the players, and you will get an idea of where the weaknesses are and where you need to work on the athlete. And you will also know that these are the strength of the athletes, and this needs to be further pushed high. So the skill aspect of it, part of it is also there. And the end of the sessions or the training, you need to do another fitness testing, because that will tell you how effective your training techniques were, how much of improvement is seen. It will also be able to tell you in case if there is no improvement with the particular weakness that has been detected with each of these players, that there either the advice that you've given is not followed properly, or probably there is some problem in the treatment technique, or there needs to be some finer changes that need to be done. So it is very, very important to understand how your treatment protocols are, your training protocols are, and it would give you a good feedback. Now let's talk about obstacles. Very few people, it's important to talk about obstacles because these are things that everyone does face on a regular basis. And many a times we don't really know how do we get about it and what should we do about it. One is there are underqualified trainers. Yes, quite a few people are trained. Yes, but then there are quite a few of them who are not trained. We need to accept this fact. And in case we are underqualified, we need to update ourselves, train ourselves, learn new things, learn whatever the new aspects of it are. So, and most of us would face this because quite a few of them do not update themselves or would prefer being underqualified. And but then they would give a lot of information or advices, which surprisingly the public takes in more than what therapists say. Like I mentioned again, the safe exercises techniques. So there are a lot of wrong exercises that can be taught. Now, what can happen with trainers who are not properly qualified is they could give you exercises and things like that, not considering the individuality, not considering your age, not considering if you have any underlying disease. Not that they intentionally would do it, but of course they themselves may not even know that they are supposed to know all these things, and there's a particular protocol that has to be followed. Yeah, some of the thing that happens is over ambitious parents. These are also certain factors that are there where in today's world, most of the parents want their children to become Saina and Sindhu at a very, very young age, and they push their children beyond the children's capacity, beyond the interest level of the children. We need to understand that they themselves have certain capacity. Every child is different, and every child's capacity is different. Their interests must be different. So if you're going to overly push them, either they're going to end up with injuries or they're going to have a physical as well as mental burnout. So that these aspects also come to a certain extent, would have certain effects on their performance as well as injuries. Scheduling of matches, like I said, the scheduling of matches, sometimes is there too many matches and there's hardly any recovery time, and then matches are in like if you look at the elite athletes, they're having matches like in different continents, one after the other. So the acclimatization time, whether that is taken care of or that's not happening. Maybe at that particular time they must be getting enough of time for acclimatization, but at lower levels it's not happening. So if you take India itself, for example, from South India you suddenly go to North India, from North, the coldest region, you come down to Goa and Bombay where it's humid. You need your body to acclimatize. So these changing things and regular matches, your body is not adapting. By the time it gets adapted to the humid climate, suddenly you're going to a very hot climate, or maybe you're going to an extremely cold climate. And pretty surprisingly, most of our tournaments are in all extreme climates. I don't know why. I still haven't understood the concept. Anyways, yes, this is a very important factor, lack of physiotherapists and physicians on the field. Now, this would be my 6th year that I've been playing at the national circuit at the veteran level. And in these 6 years, it's been maybe the first time that I played. And after that, it was just the last 2 times that we saw some therapists there. But most of the times, these therapists are student therapists who don't even know what to do, to be very frank. So we need to understand that we need qualified therapists on the field during competitions for all age groups. And we need physicians. Other than I think the Jaipur tournament that we attended just in this end of Feb this year, we didn't see any physicians on court, at least when we were playing. So physicians are also not available due to various factors maybe. Now, the thing that happens, whoever the therapists are, now the latest fad is that we are going to use taping techniques for the players. So most of the times what happens is when the player comes up with some injury, definitely there's some ankle sprain, there are going to be knee injuries. If not anything else, there's definitely going to be a muscle pull, a muscle catch, something somewhere, especially very common with the veteran category that happens there. Because of the age factor, the training techniques and everything, a lot of things changes with that particular age group. So what happens is everybody is using tape, but then many a times we don't realize that the tape is not put in a particular correct manner. Now we've also seen athletes taking tapes on their own and doing it. Now how How much do they really know of how a particular tape has to be applied? Now, this could be a reason that they're doing it on their own. One of the reasons could be because there's a lack of therapists on field, or probably lack of qualified and experienced therapists on field. So they would prefer to do it themselves. Even the rolling this is not on the field, so they're carrying most of these things. So the ice packs, the ankle binders, the kneecaps, you can see athletes carrying all these by themselves because there is nobody there actually to take care of them when they are on field and things like this happen. Many a time you find the co-sportsman who's trying to help each other out with whatever limited knowledge that they have. So we need to work on this aspect when we need to ensure that we are having physiotherapists attached to any big or small, even if it is at a local level. We need to have physiotherapists around for the athletes. Now, when the sportsmen are playing, we also need to understand that when we're using these tapes, the techniques that we use, or the methods that we're using, the taping techniques that we are using, what we've learned, we do apply it similarly on the player. Now, each player is different. Their joint flexibility would be different. The kind of sport that they're playing is again different. So the amount of movement that needs in each of these sports is different. So there has to be a plus or minus based on what requirements are needed for each of these individuals or each of these sports. So that will come with experience, because we've seen players who've applied tapes around their ankles, and it is so tight. By the end of the match, the blood supply is restricted and they're having throbbing pain and they're not able to walk and things like that, which should not hamper. So in fact, actually by applying these things, you shouldn't end up harming the player. And the most important thing a player would want from a therapist or from a physician who's treating them on court is, I need to get back to my game. First question is, am I fit enough? Is my injury so severe enough that can I go or no? So that decision is something which we need to take. Second, whatever you are helping. Now, we also use certain manipulation and mobilization techniques that are there, which one was done on me only when I had a hamstring pull, which ended up being, my muscle ended up being so sore, I couldn't play. From experience, and from having injuries and from using some of the modalities, I would definitely recommend using a lot of ice and using even ultrasound. That would give you that temporary benefit or temporary relief that a athlete or a sportsman would need for the kind of injury. Of course, if it's a minor pull and things like that, not for all the injuries. But then sports injuries, ice is something that's it's like a ramband where you can use it for most of the things, and it will definitely help at least for them to complete their game. So which is underused in most of the at least most of the tournaments that I have been personally and we have seen. So I think that is something where we need to work on. Lack of on-field first aid kit is another aspect, where again we find players carrying their own first aid kits. Lack of awareness and education. So what we do now, there are maybe a lot of factors which cannot be controlled, and for whatever reasons there are no physiotherapists or the physicians on board. So when we, in our academy, what we do is right from resuscitation, we teach children how to check for their pulse or check the ABCs of resuscitation, on how to, the simplest thing now, if I have to mention, is a crepe bandage. Most of the athletes are carrying a crepe bandage and they will just tie it around. They don't know how exactly it has to be tied around. If you take for an example for the ankle joint, when you have a lateral ankle sprain, holding it in dorsiflexion eversion is something that they don't know. So what we could also do is, as therapists, if we are associated with any of these sporting academies and things like that, we could educate them to a certain extent, because it may or may not be possible for us to go with the team every time, or with each of these individual players at the grassroots level going for different tournaments by themselves. So these basic things of how to tie a crepe bandage, or how to apply your ice pack, and how long you should apply, how you do a stretching if you get a cramp. These things I think are pretty simple things which can be taught to the children or the athletes, or even their parents or people who are accompanying them, their coaches and things. So the lack of awareness and education among the athletes and coaches also could be one of the factors which could, I mean, I remember a few years ago where I had one patient who had come. She was, I think, a 13-year-old player. So she had she had gone for a state level tournament, and I get a call from there saying that, ma'am, I finished my first match and I ended up with a hamstring pull, and in another 20 minutes I'm having my next match. What should I do? I said, get an ice. And I said, there was no therapist around. She didn't know what to do. The stretching aspect, the coach couldn't understand what I was trying to tell him what had to be done. And I was also trying to ask her to ask the officials to take some more time, buy some more time, so that she gets some time to recover from it. And we didn't know how. I couldn't assess. I mean, of course, on the phone you can't assess how severe the injury is. The coach took a decision and made her play. And the injury became pretty severe. And for the next 3 months, she had to be on complete bed rest. So, things like this can happen. So a certain amount of education, I think, should help these athletes and children and even their parents or even the coaches to help and take the right decision at the right time. Certain kind of exercises are not age specific. Now, this is true. The kind of training that an adult would do, we cannot make an adolescent, a pre-adolescent child do the same kind of exercises and overstrain them with it. Their bodies are still growing. They are different individuals themselves. The needs of each of the body is different. Their changes that are happening is different. They are growing. So we need to consider the kind of activities that you're going to do. Now, the veteran category that I am playing with, here also the kind of exercises that are being done or the training that are being done needs to be age specific, needs to be gender specific, because you're no longer young, you're middle age, you're going to grow old. So your body is changing there also. So the adaptations that are happening there, the changes that are happening there, whether how regularly you've been doing this kind of strenuous activities before you started playing, or you've taken a break of 20 years and then you suddenly started playing. All these factors need to be considered, and the kind of exercises that we choose. And like I said, gradually you need to progress. Yeah, unilateral sports. Now, this is also important, especially in children, growing children, because now if any of you have played unilateral sports for a long time and you just look at your arm, if you see the dominant hand, your muscle bulk is much more than the non-dominant hand. The very simple fact that you've been using that particular side of the body more. So in cases of children who are still growing, we need the body to grow uniformly on both sides. So exercising only one side of the body is going to cause muscle imbalances and in the long run lead to injuries. So especially in unilateral sports, when we are training, we need to ensure that the non-dominant side also is exercised. Sports specialization before puberty can also be one of the factors leading to injuries because of the stress, because of overtraining, because of burning out, the interest levels, the monotony, and the other factors that I mentioned earlier. So that needs to be pushed a little more beyond puberty and let them choose later. Of course, it's plus or minus. It's not really a hard and fast rule. Certain children do take up a particular sport at an early age itself, with interest and with the same, where again then we'll need to look whether it's a unilateral sport and how we're going to train the child. Gender specific issues need to be considered. The female athlete triad of eating disorders also need to be considered. The hormonal changes that are happening, amenorrhea that is there, also need to be considered. So these aspect needs to be considered. People need to educate themselves, coaches need to educate themselves, trainers need to educate themselves. So a therapist was always there around to help you. So take help of your therapist around. Rehabilitation. Now the protocols that are being followed, whether rehabilitation, the discontinuation, whether these, whatever advice that you have been giving your patients, whether the athletes have been correctly following it and how many have continued or not continued. Now, to tell you very frankly, with the amount of patients that we have seen or I have seen in all these years, a serious sportsman is the best patient that you could get, because they are pretty serious about, and they know the seriousness of the injury and recovering from it. So they will perfectly follow the protocols that you give them. The discontinuation would happen if it's an amateur athlete, if it's too young an athlete, or they're not interested in the particular sport and they've been forced to do it, or people who are haven't really taken training or not really so serious about the sport. again, there are no follow-ups. Follow-ups is an important thing where you need to follow up with your therapist to understand if your body is still doing well. In the follow-ups, you need to have your fitness testings done again to see again if there are any weaknesses which need to be worked on. Now, coming to being a therapist and what the advantages we have. One, we have a strong clinical diagnosis that we can do. The history taking, especially a detailed history taking, will tell you exactly what the issue is. I mean, many times a patient would come to you with, anyone coming with you with the shoulder issue will come and tell you, I have frozen shoulder. But when you actually examine it, it may not be it. It could be a rotator cuff injury. So you need a detailed history that you need to take. You need to understand the mechanism of injury and the sport specific injury. So in your history, you need to understand if they played a particular sport. You need to understand movements are associated with this particular sport, so that you will be able to zero down to the kind of sport specific injuries that are there, and it will help you to diagnose better. We have in-depth knowledge of the exercise physiology, biomechanics, and pathomechanics, which we need to apply here, and definitely will help us in treating our patients better. And a therapist with a sports background will have a plus point because you have played the sport, you have done those movements, so you know exactly where the aches and pains are happening, you know exactly what particular kind of injury that would happen. So that's an added benefit there. The bottom line is teamwork. Now, when we talk about injury, it's not only the therapist who can take care of an injury. You have your physicians, you have your surgeons, you have the therapists, you have the coaches, you have the sports psychologists. This is an important aspect which is neglected. And like I said, where fear is one of the factors which could also be related to injuries, because when you are afraid, your movements are slow, you freeze on the court, your reaction time is slow, so you can be caught unawares. So all these factors would be interlinked to a certain extent. Here where the sports psychologists would play an important role. So they also have a role to play, and we shouldn't overlook that. If I have to put it in a very simple way, I would just say, if in a family, every member has a particular role to play. And if you look at your hand, each finger has a role to play. So similarly, each of us has a role to play in managing a sports injury. So it's finally a teamwork, and how we work as a team to help that particular athlete to recover from the injury and get back on field. We need to understand that there is no substitution to exercises, and we need to understand that most of the patients need to understand this, make them understand that exercise is a must. Because if you look at the human body, if you look at our skeletal system, it's almost like a building block, and the muscles are the things that are holding on to us. So the muscles need to be worked on. It is a machine, the best machine that could ever be made on earth. So the machine needs to be worked on. So, and how do you work the human body is by exercise. So you need to exercise, and the exercise has to be balanced, where you work both the set of muscles, where the agonists as well as antagonists, so that there is no muscle imbalance later. Any questions?
Thank you, madam. I request all the participants to please share their questions with the chat box. Rupa, madam.
Yes.
Yeah, can you please ask if you have any questions, please?
Ma'am, your voice is breaking. I can't hear you.
Yeah, I think her network is an issue again here. We have one question, madam. There's one person who's asking, can you please can you share any fitness assessment module here?
Right now, I may not be able to share one. I'll send it to you later if you need it. But of course, the fitness assessment model will vary based on the kind of sport that you're playing, and also based on the age group that you're dealing with.
Okay. So some good books which is sport specific.
Any participant questions,
I can't hear you.
ma'am?
Hello?
Hello. Hello, Dr. Mahendra. Any questions from the participant side? Hello.
Yeah, I'm asking that, man.
I usually refer to most of the basic books of Broadsman and stuff like that that's available in our colleges, but we also need to keep ourselves updated with PubMed and stuff like that for the recent advances. So more than just sticking to books,
Yeah.
I think we should
Hello?
also look into whatever the
Am
new
I audible
studies that
now?
are being done. Yes, yes, ma'am.
And we Okay. The next question is that there is a theory that cold pack is to be applied within the first 4 hours of the injury, and then alternate with cold and cold packs. This is for more in for strains. So how true is the theory?
I wouldn't really say if it's only for strains. It would definitely even help for the sprains aspect of it, where you can use ice packs and hot and cold packs. Yes, that is something which even I recommend to the patients, because here you're having your vasoconstriction and dilatation that is happening. So the blood supply is increasing at that particular aspect. But along with your hot and cold packs, you also need to use your crepe bandage. You need to elevate it. So the price protocol is what we follow. It needs to be followed. So only the ice pack or only hot and cold packs may not really help.
Hello.
Yes.
Madam, I'm audible now for you?
Yes.
Yeah. Dr. Mahendra, any more questions from the participant side?
Yes, madam. There's one more question. One of the
Okay.
participants, Dr. Ravi Prakash Singh, asks that we have heard a term called carbs loading. Is it
Yes.
applicable to all type of sports, be it power athlete or endurance?
Yes, definitely. Carbohydrate loading is an aspect where you have a pre-competition meal where it comes into that. And it definitely helps you, because if you see the systems that we're talking about, the ATP, PC system and stuff like that, then the carbs that are being utilized in the first initial thing is what you have eaten in your previous meal. So it is definitely important. And carbohydrate loading will also help in storing your carbs. So it definitely is important.
Yeah.
So
Okay. I have a, yeah.
Yeah, please.
The
Madam.
way it is used, the way the carbs would be used in an aerobic athlete and an anaerobic athlete would be a little different. The immediate use would be in an anaerobic athlete. In case of endurance or aerobic athletes, it would be stored as muscle or liver glycogen and used later on. So for that, it is important.
All
Okay.
right. Thank you. There's one more
Yeah.
question here, madam, from Sudeep Chakrabarti. He asks that a long distance runner is having flat feet and overpronation syndrome. So which one should be corrected first? If it's the medial large support is not going to decrease the efficiency.
It's not about which one has to be corrected first. Now, the overpronation could also be because of the flat feet itself. So we need to assess the other muscles around also to see why the overpronation is happening in the first place. So you probably need to check. Before that, we also need to check the age of the athlete. If you're talking about a younger child or the middle-aged athlete, whether this flat feet is functional or whether it's structural, and then accordingly you need to work on that.
Okay.
Right.
There are a few questions. Can I add on, madam? There are a couple of questions.
Yeah, I think
Hello?
there's one more that I can see about the cold pack after an injury. Usually that we follow is about that, at least I follow even personally, that I have used is about 20 minutes of ice pack on the injured part. The injured part needs to be covered completely. And especially I say 20 minutes is because that much time is needed for the surface skin temperature to reduce. So if you're using less than that, it may not be as effective. But yes, of course, you also need to check for the diabetes of the patient and any skin sensitivity or changes, and then accordingly take a decision. So you cannot say because, okay, ma'am is at 20 minutes, So I'm going to give 20 minutes to this person. They might end up with a burn. So you need to take care of the skill change and you need to observe it.
Okay.
Right.
There's one more question. So which they've texted. Do we need have any added training program certification other than academics to practice as sports physiotherapist, madam?
Your voice is breaking.
Hello?
I'm not understanding.
Rupa madam, I
Yeah,
think your voice is breaking
I'll
again.
repeat the question.
Ma'am,
Yeah,
can you just type it in the chat?
I'll repeat the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. The question, do we need to have any added training program certification other than academics to practice as sports physiotherapist? Hello?
If you're
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, madam, tell me, madam. Continue.
Yeah, if your specialty, if you are a specialized sports physiotherapist, I think you would end up giving certification classes, but and that's what has been happening, if I haven't mistaken. Why would one need any certificate when you have a qualified degree? Is one aspect of it. I mean, isn't it? You have a qualified degree from a university, so why would you need a certification? Of course, we need to keep ourselves updated through and maybe these webinar sessions where you have experts coming and talking. Then you need to update yourself, and probably when you're going to these conferences and attending them, then you get these certifications saying that you have attended these, just like the medical field would do it. But other than this, from what I have seen, people have taken certifications, but what are these certifications and who are giving them and how valid are they? Are they from any of the universities, and how much weightage do these certifications actually hold? Because there have been people, I mean, I'm sure all of you would have realized that, the kind of certifications that are being coming. And there definitely is a difference when you are doing a degree, the amount of exposure, the amount of effort and the research work that goes in. I don't know how much of that is happening, because certification courses are like, it could be arranged from anywhere between 3 days to 20 days. And I have seen when, in spite of having a degree, when I was told to take a sports certification to start practicing as a sports physiotherapist, wherein they had a 6-weekend course of sports medicine to get that certification. And in 6 weekends, how can you study something that you studied for 2 years or 3 years as a postgraduate degree?
Okay.
So here we have one more question from Madam Hemalata Deepak Raj. I would unmute her. Please, madam, can you ask your question? Hemalata Deepak Raj. Okay, I believe she's not there. There's one more question here. Skill assessment before progression has now become a specialized domain and needs to be introduced at all levels of sports. Ma'am, what are your new protocols added, or any new change in the program management?
Sorry, I didn't get you.
Skill assessment before progression has now become a specialized domain and needs to be introduced at all levels of sports.
Okay.
So he asked, what are the new protocols added or any new changes in the program management?
As in, you want to know what the changes are, or are you trying to test me is a question?
Well, I really
yeah,
don't.
Definitely it is there. There is a change. There must be changes that have been happening at whatever the new levels that are there, that each of the sport has been taking, sport specific changes that are there. But then there are certain basic things which have to be followed. So all aspects of fitness that is there, that has to be taken. The reaction time, which was not there, should be added in. Now, how many people are actually following each of these changes is not really sure about. So the one which we have seen, or as an athlete, when we underwent fitness training, reaction time was something that was not taken under in fitness training aspect. They would at the max do an endurance, strength, and flexibility is what they would just cover. So the agility aspect of it, your explosive power, that needs to be taken care of. Your balance and coordination, which we usually as therapists would do for patients, need to be added into the sports faculty also. So a proper protocol needs to be done, which I've not seen till now, at least from Indian point of view. So if there is, I like to see it.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, madam. I'm sure we've run out of time here. We have some more questions that are coming in, but I presume that we'll take it up sometime next in the next webinar. Dr. Rupa Lokesh, madam,
Yes.
anything else, or we?
Yeah. No. We can go ahead. No problem. We can close it.
Yeah. Thank you, madam. Thank you, Dr.
We can
Shantala.
end the session.
Yeah, I
for a
hope it
very
was helpful.
insightful,
Thank you.
Webinar here, and I'm sure most of them who watched have gained great knowledge. I thank you again on behalf of all the members of Karnataka State Physiotherapy Federation, and we'll have to, we'd like to have many more sessions with you in future, and hopefully everyone benefits out of it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I hope.
Yeah, thank you, madam.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, the participants can directly contact her. I mean, in case you have any issues, you have all the details, or you can always mail us regarding your queries, and we'll try to get her connected to you. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Have a nice day.